When you're putting decking boards on, it's important, especially on the first one, that everything is straight. So imagine if you put your first board on a little bit crooked, all the boards after that are going to be crooked as well. So we need to make sure we get the first one straight. We'll put that right in the center of the stud. I'll mark a light line where I want to have that centered, and then also I'm going to go an inch in from each side. In order to make sure that the wood doesn't split when we put in our 2.5 inch decking screws, I'm going to pre-drill it with an 1/8 inch bit. Using a clamp, I'm going to readjust this board, and up at the other end that we just drilled, there's a little bit of a bow coming down here on this decking board, and we need to make sure we have that straight before we continue adding the decking board. So I'm just going to clamp this in. I have a line marked on this 2x4, which is my reference. It's about halfway in, or 5/8 in from the other side. This 2x4 is my main reference. It's bolted to the concrete wall, which everything is mounted to and is perpendicular to. So I'm looking at the gap, and I'm making sure that gap is the same going all the way back. For our bolt pattern, we'll skip every other joist before we put the screws in. We'll skip every other beam until we get to the end, and then the end of each board's always going to have 2 screws. Whenever you add the next board, it's important that the gap is going to stay the same between each one. So you need something to keep it consistent, and I'm going to use a 16 penny nail right in between there, and then we can push the board together, and I can have that at multiple points to make sure everything stays consistent. Across this whole board, I'll put 4 of these nails to space it, and you can even tack them in a little bit if you don't want them to fall out. Just make sure that the board's tight up against the nail before you drill your pilots and put the screws in. We're alternating the screw pattern, so every other board we're going to put a screw in, but the end of each board always gets a screw just to keep that held down. Because this first board is skipping this and has the screws in here, we're going to bring it back and put the screws in here. This one needs a little bit of adjustment. You can see that's a bit loose there. I'm just going to take the clamp and tighten it up. Just like that. The spacer here is a little loose just because we've got a little bit of warpage. Now the gap here where the nail is too tight. So we're actually going to have to spread this a little bit because the wood forms to the nail and it makes the gap too small. I'll just use this chisel as the wedge, and we're going to get that to the right size, expand that. Right there the nail slips in. Now that we've got the first board in and correct and straight, it's just a matter of going down the rest of the deck, screwing it in, making sure the placement's correct, and from here it's just a lot of repetitive work. And then as we go through, we'll make sure that this length is going to be the same, because if your spacing starts to get off, you'll notice that, and then also check for square.